Hello, my name is George Dennison. I am a writer and broadcaster at 4Player Network, and these are my top 10 favourite games from 2013. If you had told me a few years ago that a game about processing papers would be in one of my top 10 lists, I would have laughed and probably called you a damn right bloody fool. Yet here we are in 2013, and Papers, Please, the self-described dystopian document thriller, is one of my favourite games of the year. This bleak, stressful yet absorbing game does a great job of creating an oppressive atmosphere and questioning your moral boundaries in a world of paranoia and corruption. It's a great example of how video games can be more than just shooters, racers, etc., while still providing a substantial, deep experience. The game is so effective at putting you in the shoes of an unappreciated, overworked border control officer that it can be draining to play for long periods of time, but its excellent writing and cast of characters keep you playing to the end. Papers, Please gets my green stamp of approval. A Techland game in a top 10 list? What crack has George been smoking, and where can I get my hands on some? Yes, after making the zombie-thwacking dirge Dead Island, its lazy semi-sequel Riptide, and the insufferable Call of Juarez The Cartel, Techland have managed to redeem themselves somewhat with Call of Juarez Gunslinger. They mercifully did the right thing in bringing the series back to the Wild West, taking the player through a number of entertaining scenarios, battling it out against iconic figures like Billy the Kid and Jesse James. Bullet time is generally overused in gaming, but for some reason I found the bullet time in Gunslinger particularly satisfying to use, and the life-saving bullet dodge is a cool addition as well. I'm also a big fan of the cel-shaded visual style, again something that's starting to get overused in video games, but it works here. The campaign gets a little stale towards the end, but in short bursts, Gunslinger is still one of the most enjoyable shooters I've played in a while, and therefore one of my favourite games of the year. I'm a huge fan of the Bioshock series, and the first Bioshock is one of my favourite games of all time. So it's perhaps a little surprising that Bioshock Infinite wound up this low down on my top 10 list. I definitely enjoyed this game, particularly the rich, detailed world of Columbia and its thought-provoking story. The skyhooks were a great addition to the combat as well, and the game is at its strongest in large, open areas that allow for a range of tactics in expansive spaces with a dizzying sense of verticality. However, Infinite has a number of flaws that I felt held it back from being as good as it could have been. It feels almost stiflingly linear at times, and outside of its combat there isn't a lot of depth to the level of interaction the player has with the world around them, which is a shame considering the beautiful environment irrational games have created. I also felt the combat, as fun as it was, started to get monotonous after a while. Having said that, I still had a great time with Bioshock Infinite, and even though it didn't live up to the hype, it still deserves a place in my top 10. It's a thinking man's roller coaster ride, which, as far as AAA roller coaster rides go, is better than most. A number of indie games I played this year started out being a little underwhelming, but ended up delivering far more than I originally expected. No game epitomises this more than Brothers: A Tale of Two Sons. Initially, I had it pegged as a quaint but insubstantial micro-fable, yet as the game played out across a series of imaginative, beautifully realised environments, it really started to grow on me. One of the biggest draws of the game is its control system, which demands a level of ambidexterity which can be tricky to master, but very satisfying to pull off. This system initially works to serve a range of straightforward puzzles, but towards the end of the game it starts to become much more cleverly tied to its thematic ideas. This leads to some powerful moments and a dark conclusion that proved to me that this wasn't the whimsical fairy tale I thought it was. It's a shame that people seem so fixated on the fact that the game is short. Brothers: A Tale of Two Sons is just the right length to ensure that it explores all of its ideas whilst not outstaying its welcome. It's a brief but memorable experience that I'm happy to have on this list. Part Game Boy Color era Zelda, part David Lynch-esque nightmare, Anodyne is a game more people should play. This top-down adventure is strange, surreal, and highly compelling. One of the things I like about this game so much is just how unpredictable its environments are. You can walk out of a tranquil forest area and suddenly find yourself in a haunted suburban town, a futuristic world full of triangle people, or a snow world where hostile snowmen tell you everyone's an asshole and you're all alone. There's a striking juxtaposition of reality and fantasy in Anodyne, and they often appear to bleed into each other, creating a memorable adventure that is peculiar, sometimes farcical, sometimes disturbing, but always intriguing. It doesn't have the depth of the best Zeldas, but there are enough twists and turns to Anodyne's dungeons to make them satisfying to beat. It's the bizarre things you'll find in the nooks and crannies of its wider world, however, that will draw you back into its mad landscape. The game's disjointed, dreamlike atmosphere means that it won't be for everyone, but its dark, self-aware sense of humour, hypnotic ambience, and the large, varied world it offers you to explore cements it in my top 10 list. Now we're into the top 5, and my 5th favourite game of the year is The Stanley Parable. It's a little difficult to explain what makes this game so great without spoiling it for people who haven't experienced it yet, so if you haven't played it, go do so right now. Don't worry about watching the rest of my top 10 video for the time being. If you haven't played The Stanley Parable, cancel all your appointments, go and download it, and enjoy. It's an ingenious, hilarious deconstruction of video game narrative structure. Also, make sure you find all of the game's endings. The tiniest of changes can cause massive repercussions in how the story plays out, and this game has some crazy rabbit holes that you could explore. As a meta-commentary, The Stanley Parable presents an interesting dialogue between players and designers, and it explores some of the frictions that arise from trying to tell a meaningful story whilst also giving the player a sense of agency. Like I said, it's difficult to really talk about what makes the game so great without spoiling it too much. Really, you should just go and play it if you haven't already. Also check out the demo, even if you played and finished the main game, because it's a mini masterpiece in itself.
Here, with no distractions, to study room 417, not to actually...
Gunpoint is a fantastic game, and if I had to break down what I love about it so much, it would probably be the following 3 things. 1. The cross-link mechanic is brilliant, and makes Gunpoint as much a puzzle game as a stealth game. It's the kind of excellent mechanic that allows for just the right degree of freedom, experimentation and self-expression, whilst also offering a challenge. 2. The jumping mechanic is really satisfying. It reminds me of those little plastic frogs I used to get in Christmas crackers. I love how you can spring through a window onto a guard, punching him to take him out, then leap onto the ceiling before another guard notices you. 3. The writing in this game is witty, engaging and hilarious, and makes Gunpoint a genuinely laugh-out-loud gaming experience. This is one of the few games I've played that I genuinely wish was a little longer, but the handful of hours I spent with Gunpoint provided some of the best gaming moments of the year, and I can't wait to see what Tom Francis, the game's designer, comes up with next. Now we're into the top 3. I'm George Dennison, and now it's time for BIT.TRIP presents Runner 2, Future Legend of Rhythm Alien. I picked up this game based on the good reviews, having no prior experience with the BIT.TRIP games and really having no idea what to expect. Guess what? This game wound up being one of my favourites of the year. Initially I had a bit of a love-hate relationship with this game. It's great fun, but once you hit the 3rd world or so, it gets hard. And I've had a fair few rage quits playing Runner 2. What you have to realise with this game though, is that while it presents itself as a runner or platform game, it's really a rhythm action or music game. The rhythm in the title is no joke. It's all about keeping in time with the beat, and once I realised this, jumping, ducking and smashing through obstacles became almost instinctual. Of course, a music game is nothing without good music, and composer Disasterpiece, who also did the soundtrack for last year's Fez, has created catchy, breezy and uplifting tunes and effects for Runner 2 that create a harmonious fusion of gameplay and sound design. Because of its firm but surmountable challenge, its super satisfying gameplay, and because it never fails to put a smile on my face, Runner 2 gets my number 3 spot. I'm really interested in environmental storytelling in video games, and Gone Home is all about environmental storytelling. It's a game that tells a gripping story of a suburban family just through the possessions, journals and detritus lying around their abandoned house. Although the game's breadcrumb of trail of journals, post-it notes, ticket stubs and other ephemera is laid out in a slightly contrived manner by necessity, you still get the sense of organically discovering the dark secrets of these people's lives by looking through their things. The game is ultimately a romance story, which is a breath of fresh air in itself, although the stories of the other characters, particularly the father, are just as engaging. It's cheesy in places and the ending is a little rushed, but I still enjoyed this game immensely, and I found it pretty powerful in places. This is a game that tells its story through small, subtle details, which is a nice change from all the games that try and communicate narrative through grand, sweeping gestures. With its attention to detail, immersive environment, and refreshing take on video game storytelling, Gone Home gets my number 2 spot. Sometimes a game might have a great looking art style, a well written thought-provoking story, or an inventive unique mechanic, but it's rare to see a game that manages to pull off all three. The Swapper, however, does exactly that. This mind-breaking, atmospheric puzzle platformer is my game of the year simply because I can't think of another game I've played this year that I've been so invested in, and the experience really stuck with me. It explores some fascinating thematic ideas that it manages to tie into the mechanics, and it's up there with some of the best thought-provoking sci-fi movies like Moon and Solaris in terms of plot, which looks into metaphysical questions about the body and soul. The ending presented one of the most interesting choices I've had to make in any game I've played this year, and it was the final few moments of the Swapper that elevated it from being great to one of my games of the year. The puzzles are where the meat of the experience lies, however, and my god, those puzzles! Some of them are seriously challenging, but like all the best puzzle games, the solutions are always logical, and can be reached with a little patience and a bit of lateral thinking. I would say the puzzles are on par with those of Braid and Portal, and they are always super satisfying to solve, giving you that eureka moment when you're finally able to think your way around the game's interlocking barriers of switches, obstacles and light combinations. They can be a bit fiddly to execute, but not often enough to spoil the experience. The handcrafted art style and the beautiful soundtrack are the icing on the cake, and play a big part in lending what could have been a sterile experience an unforgettable atmosphere and distinct personality. The Swapper isn't perfect, but of all the games I've played this year, it's the one I've remembered the most fondly and been the most eager to talk about. I've enjoyed it more than anything else I've played in 2013, so I'm going to name it my Game of the Year. So, that's 2013. I have yet to pick up one of the next-gen consoles, but I have high hopes for 2014. And I also hope that there's going to be lots of great next-gen games that will come out. So I'm looking forward to that. Farewell 2013, it's been fun.